I was working through the quarterly reports at my desk when my phone buzzed with a message that flipped my day on its head. It said, "I need 1 week to decide if you are worth keeping." No setup, no background, just a cold deadline from the woman I had been married to for 6 years, Lauren. Most men would have panicked. Most would have called right away, pleading for a conversation and promising to fix whatever needed fixing. I read the text again, and something lined up in my mind. She was not asking for time to repair us. She had started a countdown, like I was a product with an expiration label she was not sure she wanted to buy. Beat. I put the phone face down and finished the report in front of me. 20 minutes later, I picked the phone back up and typed my answer. "Take all the time you need. I will be using mine productively. Send." Her reply arrived in seconds. That is it. There were no questions for me to answer. So I said, "What is the question? You have made your position clear." The typing dots appeared, vanished, and came back a few times. She expected me to fold, to unload a stream of messages asking what I had done wrong, what I should change, and how I could climb back into her good graces. Instead, I opened my laptop and started making changes that were long overdue. First stop, our joint credit cards. I called the bank and told the representative, a patient guy named Derek, that I needed to remove an authorized user due to separation proceedings. He was professional and quick. Within 10 minutes, Lauren's access was paused. Next, I updated the passwords on our streaming accounts, our online shopping profiles, and our shared cloud storage. If she wanted to evaluate my worth, she could do it without leaning on my resources. My phone buzzed again. "What did you do to the Netflix account?" I answered, "I am prioritizing my expenses during your evaluation period." She shot back, "Are you serious right now?" I said, "Completely serious. You said you need time to think. I am giving you a full look at life without me." The point was not revenge. It was clarity. For months, maybe even years, I had felt like Lauren treated me more like a convenience than a partner. I thought about the times at dinner with friends when she brushed off my opinions. I thought about how she would make plans without checking with me and then act annoyed when I already had commitments. I remembered the small eye rolls when I suggested date nights or weekend trips. That text of hers was not random. It was the final step for someone who had been tallying up our marriage like a business deal, listing strengths and weaknesses, and calculating whether the benefits beat the costs. Fine. Now she could run the numbers with real conditions. I drove home that evening feeling strangely calm. The house felt different when I stepped inside. Lauren stood in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with her arms folded, clearly set on having the talk she believed we needed. "We should talk," she said. "About what?" I asked. "About what you did today. Cutting off my cards. Changing passwords. That is pretty extreme." I poured a glass of water and met her eyes. "You sent me a message that you are taking a week to decide if I am worth keeping. I figured you would want an accurate picture. It is hard to evaluate someone's value while you are actively using the things they pay for." Color rose in her face. "That is not what I meant." "Then you should have been more specific," I said. "Communication matters in a marriage. Or so I have heard." The sarcasm landed. She shifted her weight, realizing this was not following the script she had in mind. "Look," she said, "I think we need to figure out if we are right for each other. Things have been different lately." "Different how?" I asked. "You know what I mean." "Actually, I do not," I said. "But here is what I do know. You sent a message today that treats our marriage like a probation period. You want a week to think about my value? Go ahead. But you are going to do it honestly. No shared accounts. No joint perks. No safety net. If you are judging whether I am worth keeping, you should experience what you would actually be keeping or losing." She stared at me for a long moment, probably waiting for me to soften and say I was just hurt and acting out. I took another drink of water, set the glass down, and headed upstairs. "Where are you going?" she asked. "To use my time productively," like I said. That night, I researched divorce attorneys in our area. I was not making a final decision. I just know that a man who understands his own worth does not sit around waiting for someone else to confirm it. I bookmarked 3 firms with strong reputations and made a mental note to call them the next day. The phone stayed quiet for the rest of the evening. There were no apology messages. There were no attempts to take back the ultimatum. There was no sign that she understood that demanding someone prove their worth is not the bedrock of a healthy marriage. When I turned off the lights, something important hit me. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the guy trying to read her moods and predict disappointments, but the man who knows what he brings to the table and does not need anyone's permission to respect it. She wanted a week to think. That is fine. She was about to learn that sometimes an evaluation says more about the evaluator than the person being evaluated. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm and went straight to the gym. I was not there because I was anxious or trying to make a point. I was there because keeping my routine is part of keeping my standards. When you understand your own value, you do not let someone else's doubt knock you off your rhythm. I came home and found Lauren at the kitchen table with her laptop open and a mug of coffee nearby. She looked up like she was waiting on a morning after talk about what happened yesterday. Good workout? She asked, using that easy tone people use when they want a bigger reaction. Always is, I said. I grabbed a protein shake from the refrigerator and started breakfast. I have been thinking about what you said yesterday. That is the idea, right? I added. She closed the laptop and turned toward me. I think you are taking this the wrong way. When I said I needed time to think, I meant we should both look at where we are. This is not only about you. I cracked 2 eggs into the pan and kept my back to her. Interesting. Your message said you needed time to decide if I am worth keeping. Nothing about a mutual review. Nothing about both of us reflecting. Just you judging my value. Do not twist my words, she said. I am not twisting anything, I answered. I am reading what you wrote. I turned around and leaned on the counter. But since you want an evaluation, let us talk about it. What are you evaluating specifically? That question caught her flat-footed. She expected me to be defensive or to beg for details so I could fix things. Instead, I treated it like the deal sheet she had handed me. Well, we have been growing apart, she said. You have to admit that. Growing apart how? You are always working late. You do not want to go out with my friends anymore. You have been distant. I nodded once. That is one way to see it. The working late part is true. I have been putting in extra hours because I was promoted to regional manager 3 months ago. Do you remember that? I came home excited to tell you, and you were upset because it meant I would miss your book club wine night. Her jaw tightened a touch. As for your friends, I went on. You are right again. I pulled back from spending evenings with people who pass the entire night complaining about their husbands while the husbands are not there to speak for themselves. Call it a character flaw of mine. That is not fair, she said. Neither is being called distant by someone who spent last weekend at her sister's place and did not mention it until the car was already moving down the driveway. The eggs finished. I slid them onto a plate, added toast, and sat across from her at the table. She watched me take a few bites, saying nothing while she recalibrated. Look, she finally said, maybe I did not phrase the message perfectly. The point is, we need to figure out if this is working. Sure, I said. And here is where your evaluation week gets interesting. If you are spending 7 days deciding whether I am worth keeping, that suggests you are measuring me against other options. So let us make sure you have the facts. I took out my phone and held up a screenshot. I called our insurance company this morning. You are still covered through this week, but I asked about the separation terms. If we make it permanent, you will need your own policy. With your age and your medical history, the current estimate is about $400 per month. Her eyes widened. I also looked at the mortgage. If we divorce, the house is sold unless one of us can refinance the full amount alone. With your current income from the part-time marketing job, you do not qualify. But do not worry. I ran the numbers on your share of the equity after the real estate agent fees and closing costs. You would have enough for a good apartment deposit. What are you doing? She asked. Giving you clean data for your evaluation, I said. You cannot judge whether someone is worth keeping if you do not understand exactly what you are keeping or losing. She stared at me like I had grown a second head. This was not the version of events where I spend the week auditioning for her approval. I also moved half of our joint savings into a separate account, I added. It seemed fair since you are unsure about keeping our finances together. You cannot just do that. Actually, I can. It is my money as well. But if you decide I am worth keeping, we can talk about pooling funds again. If not, well, now you have a clear picture of your finances. The blood drained from her face. She was starting to understand that her ultimatum had not put her in the driver's seat. It had simply given me permission to stop pretending that her uncertainty was not already shaping my choices. This is crazy, she said. I was not trying to threaten you. Then what were you trying to do? I asked. She opened her mouth, then shut it, because the honest truth was simple. She wanted to crank up the urgency, so I would chase her like I did when we first dated. She wanted to feel pursued, chosen, and put first. But she had misread the moment completely. I was trying to have an honest conversation about our relationship, she said. No, I said. You were trying to put me on probation. That is different. Honest conversations happen face to face with both people talking. Ultimatums get fired off by text. I finished my breakfast and rinsed the plate. I am heading to work. Take all the time you want with your evaluation. And remember, evaluations run both ways. While you decide if I am worth keeping, I am getting a very clear picture of what it feels like to be married to someone who treats us as conditional. I grabbed my keys and walked toward the door. Wait, she called after me. What is that supposed to mean? I turned and looked at her, sitting there with her laptop, her coffee, and a carefully planned ultimatum that was blowing up in her hands. It means a man who knows his own worth does not waste time begging others to see it. He spends his time with people who already do. By Thursday evening, her tone had shifted. She was getting desperate. I could tell because the soft, careful small talk was gone. She had moved on to what I recognized as test number 2. I walked in and found her in the kitchen with a man I had never seen. He was tall, probably mid-30s, wearing an expensive watch and that slick, confident smile men wear when they think they are playing a clever game. Hey, honey, she said, her voice too bright. This is Tyler from my yoga class. I invited him for dinner since you have been so focused on work lately. The setup could not have been more obvious. She wanted to see if I would get jealous. She wanted me to fight for her attention, crack under the pressure, and act like the insecure husband she expected. Tyler stuck out his hand with a grin that told me he understood the game. Nice to meet you, man. Your wife has been telling me a lot about you. I shook his hand and smiled. All good things, I hope. Although, given the week we are having, I am not sure which story she has been sharing. His confidence dipped for a second. That was not the line he had been prepared for. She mentioned you work in sales, he said. That is cool. I am in real estate. Regional management, actually, I said. I was promoted recently. But real estate is interesting. Tough market right now with the interest rates. You must be working twice as hard to close deals. Yeah. Well, you know how it is, he said. Adapt or die, right? Absolutely, I said. Speaking of adapting, I hope you do not mind keeping dinner simple. I have been doing most of the grocery runs this week while my wife takes some time to evaluate our relationship. The room went silent. She shot me a stare that could have melted steel. I kept an easy, polite expression. Tyler looked between us and realized he had walked into more than a friendly dinner. Oh, that is fine. Relationships take work, right? They do, I said. Though I have learned some people prefer to outsource that work to other people instead of doing it themselves. But everyone has their style. I opened the refrigerator and pulled out ingredients. Hope you like pasta, Tyler. That is about all we have since I am not entirely sure what our grocery budget looks like after this week. She stared at me with a mix of anger and shock. This was supposed to be my moment to get territorial, to demand an explanation, to prove I cared enough to fight. Instead, I treated her yoga friend like any other guest and laid her tactics out in plain sight. Actually, Tyler said, glancing at his watch. I just remembered I have an early showing tomorrow. Maybe we should reschedule. Do not be silly, I said, filling a pot with water. You are already here. And my wife put effort into planning. I would hate to see that go to waste. Tyler looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Whatever version of our marriage he had heard did not include a calm husband willing to talk about real problems in front of a stranger. So, Tyler, I said, placing the pot on the stove, how long have you been doing yoga? I have thought about trying it, but I was not sure if beginners are welcome in established classes. About 6 months, he said. And yes, beginners are definitely welcome. Good to know, I said. Maybe I will join you both next week, assuming we are still doing couple activities after my wife completes her evaluation period. She finally found her voice. Can I talk to you in the other room? Sure, I said. Tyler, make yourself comfortable. We will be just a minute. I followed her into the living room. She spun around fast, eyes hot. What are you doing? Making dinner for your guest, I said. Was that not the plan? You know exactly what I mean. Actually, I do not, I said. You invited someone over for dinner. I am being a polite host. Is there a problem? You are embarrassing me by being honest about our situation. I thought transparency mattered to you, I said. You did say you needed time to evaluate whether I am worth keeping. You cannot just tell people that. Why not? It is the truth. Unless you have changed your mind about needing that evaluation week. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Saying yes would admit it was a tactic. Saying no would double down on a move that was already backfiring. This is not how it was supposed to go, she said. How what was supposed to go? I asked. Dinner with your yoga friend? Or your attempt to make me jealous? Her face went red. I was not trying to make you jealous. Then why did you not mention you invited someone until I walked in and found him in our kitchen? Why the sudden burst of hospitality when you have barely cooked a meal in a month? Because you have been distant, she said, words tumbling out. I thought maybe seeing me interact with other people would remind you what you are missing. There it was, the honest answer she had not planned to say out loud. So you invited another man into our house to show me what I am missing, I said. During the same week you say you need to decide if I am worth keeping. Do I have that right? That is not. I did not mean it like that. Tyler seems like a decent guy, I said. He is about to realize he was recruited into someone else's relationship drama. That is not fair to him, and it is not fair to me. I headed back toward the kitchen. I'm going to finish dinner like a proper host. You can explain to your friend why his evening just got more complicated than he expected. When we walked in, Tyler already had his keys in hand. You know what? I actually do need to prep for a showing tomorrow. Thank you for the invitation, though. You sure? I asked. The pasta is almost ready. Yeah, I am sure. Nice meeting you, he said, and slipped out. She turned to me with a look of pure frustration. Happy now? About what? I said. Having an honest conversation over dinner? Always. You humiliated me. No, I said. I treated your guest with respect and spoke plainly about our situation. If that felt humiliating, maybe ask yourself why. I drained the pasta and started plating it. Besides, I thought you wanted to evaluate whether I am worth keeping. You cannot do that without seeing how I handle nights like this. She stared at me for a long beat, realizing that every test had flipped on her. Instead of making me scramble for her attention, she was seeing the man she married, just without the need to beg for approval. You are not the same person I married, she said. You are right, I said. The man you married would have spent this week pleading with you to change your mind. This man knows better. Friday morning came with a new strategy. I found her at the kitchen table with a notepad covered in neat bullet points. The testing energy was gone. This was damage control. I think we need a real conversation, she said as I poured my coffee. We have been having real conversations all week, I said. Unless you mean a conversation where I pretend your ultimatum never happened. Look, I will admit I handled it badly, she said. The text, the 1 week thing. I was frustrated and I did not express myself well. I sat down across from her. Go on. What I was trying to say is that we have fallen into a rut, she said. We do not talk like we used to. We do not do things together. I feel like we have turned into roommates instead of spouses. Interesting theory, I said. Tell me more about this rut. She checked her notes. You have been working more hours. And when you are home, you are usually on your laptop or watching those business podcasts. The promotion required 30 hours of training modules, I said. I had to complete them on my own time. I told you that more than once. I know, but still. And those business podcasts? I said. I was researching investment strategies so we could move our savings into higher yield accounts. That benefits both of us. She shifted in her chair. Okay, but what about the social side? You used to enjoy going out with friends. Your friends, I said, spend entire evenings complaining about their husbands' jobs, their husbands' hobbies, their husbands' families. I got tired of being the only man in the room who was treated like a disappointing employee. They do not do that, she said. I took out my phone and scrolled to the text thread from last Friday, when we were at dinner with your book club. Quote, at least your husband actually listens when you talk. Mine just grunts and goes back to his video games. End quote. That was said to you, about me, while I was sitting right there. Her face lost its color. The Friday before that, I said, someone told you. You are so lucky he actually plans date nights. I have to literally schedule intimacy like a dentist appointment. Again, about me, in front of me, like I was part of the furniture. I did not realize you heard that, Lawrence said. I heard all of it, I told her. Every eye roll when I added something to the conversation. Every passive-aggressive jab about men in general that was clearly aimed at me in particular. And every time you laughed along instead of standing up for your husband. She looked down at her notepad, finally seeing that her prepared talking points were not going to stand up against actual records. But here is what really stands out. I continued. All week, you have been testing me. The ultimatum. The yoga friend. The little plays to make me chase your attention. Not once did you ask what I have been thinking during your evaluation period. What do you mean? She asked. You have been focused on deciding whether I am worth keeping, and it never crossed your mind that I might be making the same evaluation about you. The rest of the color drained from her face. On Wednesday, I said, I met with 3 divorce attorneys. Not because I had decided anything yet, but because I wanted to understand my options. It turns out documentation matters. I pulled a folder from my briefcase and set it on the table. Inside were bank statements showing the individual accounts I opened, screenshots of your messages, including the original ultimatum, photos from the night you invited Tyler over without warning, and a timeline of your behavior patterns over the last 6 months. You cannot be serious, she said. I am absolutely serious, I replied. You wanted a week to decide if I am worth keeping. I used the same week to decide if I want to be kept by someone who treats our marriage as conditional. She stared at the folder like it might explode. This is insane, she said. I was trying to save our marriage. No, I said. You were trying to control it. That is different. Saving a marriage takes 2 people working together. What you did was issue an ultimatum and expect me to dance for your approval. I never said you had to prove anything, she said. You literally told me you needed time to decide if I was worth keeping, I said. What exactly did you think I was supposed to do with that? Sit quietly while you decided my fate. She fell silent for a long moment, probably seeing how her actions looked when laid out as evidence instead of feelings. What happens now? She asked. That depends on you, I said. Your evaluation period ends tomorrow. But here is what you did not consider. The moment you told me you were not sure I was worth keeping, you showed me exactly how you view this marriage. I leaned back in my chair. A woman who values her husband does not put him on probation. She does not bring other men into our home to test his reactions. She does not threaten the stability of the marriage to get attention. I was not threatening anything, she said. Then what were you doing? I asked. She opened her mouth and closed it again, because the honest answer was obvious to both of us. The attorneys all told me the same thing. I said, documentation matters. Intent matters. A pattern of behavior matters. And what I documented this week is a pattern of manipulation, testing, and emotional games. Are you divorcing me? She asked, her voice unsteady. I am prepared to, I said. The papers are drafted. All they need is my signature. Her hands began to shake. Over one text message, she asked. Over 6 years of marriage where my wife apparently believes I need to prove my worth, instead of recognizing it, I said. I stood and refilled my coffee. You wanted a week to decide if I am worth keeping. Tomorrow is your deadline. But hear me on this. Whatever you decide, I have already made up my mind about what it means to be married to someone who thinks ultimatums are acceptable tools. What does that mean? She asked. It means that even if you decide I am worth keeping, I said, I am not sure you are worth keeping me. Saturday morning, I was enjoying my coffee and reading when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw Patricia's car in the driveway. The cavalry had arrived. I opened the door and found not just Patricia, Lauren's mother, but also her sister, Emily, and her best friend from college, Megan. All 3 looked ready for a fight. We need to talk, Patricia announced, sweeping past me into the house. Good morning to you, too, I said. Please, come in. They formed a line in the living room like a panel. Lauren came down from upstairs a moment later, clearly the one who had put this together. We are here because someone needs to talk sense into you, Emily began. She has been crying all week. I am sorry to hear that, I said. Ultimatums tend to be hard on everyone involved. Patricia stepped forward. Do not get clever with me, young man. Marriage is about compromise. You cannot threaten divorce every time there is a disagreement. Interesting take, I said. Tell me this, Patricia. When your daughter sent a message saying she needed a week to decide if I am worth keeping, was that compromise? She expressed her feelings as an ultimatum, and somehow I am the one accused of threatening divorce. Megan jumped in. Look, I know Lauren. She does not mean half the things she says when she is upset. You should know that by now. So I should have ignored it, I said. I should have dismissed a written evaluation of my value as emotional noise. You should have fought for your marriage instead of giving up at the first sign of trouble, Megan said. I set my coffee down and looked at each of them. Let me ask you something. If your husband sent a text that he needed a week to decide if you were worth keeping, how would you respond? Patricia's face tightened. That is different. How? I asked. Because men do not. They would not, she said. Would not what? I asked. Would not evaluate their wives like a business investment? Would not invite other people into the home during the so-called evaluation period? Would not put their spouses on probation? Silence fell over the room. Emily glanced at Lauren, clearly realizing there were missing details. What other people? Patricia demanded. Color rose in Lauren's cheeks. It was not like that. She invited a man from yoga to dinner on Thursday night, I said. She did not mention it until I walked in and found him in our kitchen. When I asked her privately, she admitted she wanted me to see her engaging with someone else, to remind me what I was supposedly missing. Megan's mouth fell open. You did what? It was not a date, Lauren said. It was dinner. During the week you were deciding whether to keep your husband, I said, with a man I had never met. No advance notice. No context. I looked at the three of them. Would any of you do that to your spouse? Emily stared at Lauren like she had grown horns. That is wildly inappropriate. Which brings us to why you are here, I said. You came to convince me to fight for my marriage. But none of you has asked a basic question. What exactly am I fighting for? Patricia crossed her arms. You are fighting for your wife. You are fighting for your family. Am I? I asked. Because this week my wife treated our marriage like a probation term. She tested my reactions by bringing another man into our home. She issued an ultimatum by text message instead of having an adult conversation. And now she has recruited family to pressure me instead of addressing the issues directly. I gestured toward Lauren. So tell me, what exactly am I supposed to fight to keep? A woman who loves you, Patricia said, but some of the force was gone from her voice. A woman who loves me does not put me on trial, I said. She does not test me with other men. She does not threaten the stability of our marriage to pull my attention back to her. Megan shifted in her seat. Maybe there is fault on both sides. Absolutely, I said. I should have called out these patterns months ago instead of hoping they would sort themselves out. I should have set clearer boundaries about what I will and will not allow. I should have recognized sooner that someone who treats love as conditional may not be ready for marriage. Lauren finally spoke. That is not fair. I do love you. You love the idea of me, I said. You love what I provide, what I represent, and how you feel when it suits you. But you do not love me enough to offer basic respect. That is not true, she said. Then explain the ultimatum, I said. Explain why you believed it was appropriate to give your husband a deadline to prove his worth. Explain why you brought another man over during that week. She looked around for backup, but her team was starting to see things differently. Emily cleared her throat first. I think we should go. This sounds like something you two need to handle privately. Actually, I said, since everyone is here, there is something you should know. Your intervention is unnecessary. Today is the last day of the evaluation week that Lauren requested. Tomorrow she will give me her decision about whether I am worth keeping. I stood and walked to my briefcase. But I have already reached my own decision about whether I want to be married to someone who uses ultimatums as a relationship tool. I took out the documents and placed them on the coffee table. All four women stared like they were looking at hazardous material. These are divorce papers, I said. They are complete except for my signature. Whether I sign them depends entirely on what happens in the next 24 hours. Patricia had gone pale. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious, I said. Your daughter asked for a week to evaluate my worth. I used the same week to evaluate what it means to be married to someone who treats our relationship as conditional. I looked directly at Lauren. You have until tomorrow evening to decide if I am worth keeping. But understand this. Even if you say I am not sure you have shown that you are worth keeping me. The room went still. Her support team had arrived ready to shame me into backing down, to convince me that scrambling for scraps of affection was noble. Instead, they were watching what it looks like when a man refuses to beg for basic respect. I think you should all head out now, I said. She has serious thinking to do, and she needs to do it without a crowd telling her that ultimatums are the same thing as expressing feelings. They filed toward the door. Patricia turned back. Marriage is supposed to be forever. You are absolutely right, I said, which is exactly why it should not be treated like a probation period. Sunday evening arrived with the weight of a final chapter. I spent the day the same way I had spent the rest of the week, living with dignity and purpose. I went for a run, caught up on reading, and cooked a simple dinner. No dramatic speeches. No last-minute campaign to sway her choice. A man who knows his value does not lobby for recognition. She moved through the house quietly, like she was walking through a museum of her old life. Every few hours I caught her watching me with an expression I could not name. It was not the calculating look from earlier in the week. It looked a lot like fear. At exactly 7 o'clock, she stepped into the living room where I was reading. She had clearly rehearsed what she wanted to say. "I have made my decision," Lauren said, her voice barely above a whisper. I closed the book and gave her my full attention. "I am listening. I want to keep you. I want to keep us," she said. "I see now that I handled everything wrong this week. The text, the ultimatum, bringing Tyler over. I was scared we were drifting apart, and I thought if I created urgency, it would remind you what we mean to each other." She sat down across from me and laced her fingers together. I know it was manipulative. I know it was unfair. I was desperate, and desperate people do foolish things. I nodded once. "Go on. I have been thinking about what you said about seeing our relationship as conditional," she continued. "You were right. I treated our marriage like something you had to earn, instead of a choice we both made." She drew a shaky breath. "I do not want to lose you. I do not want to lose us. If you will give me another chance, I will do better. I will talk instead of testing. I will trust instead of manipulating. I will treat you like the husband you are, not like someone who has to prove himself." When she finished, the room went quiet again. Hope and fear wrestled in her eyes while she waited for my response to her decision that I was worth keeping. I reached to the coffee table and picked up the divorce papers that had been sitting there since Saturday. She froze as I opened the folder. "I appreciate your honesty," I said, "and I believe you mean every word. But here is what you still do not understand." I took out a pen and hovered it over the signature line. "The moment you sent that message asking for a week to measure my worth, our marriage changed. Not because of the choice you would eventually make, but because of what you revealed about how you see me." The color drained from her face. "Please do not sign those. For 6 years, I believed I was married to someone who chose me," I said. "Someone who knew my value and wanted to build a life with me. This week, I learned I was married to someone who sees me as a commodity to be reevaluated from time to time." "That is not true anymore," she said. "I told you I realized I was wrong." "You realized it when the consequences became real," I said. "What happens the next time you feel insecure? The next rough patch? Do I get another evaluation week? Another ultimatum?" Tears ran down her face. I kept going. "You wanted a week to decide if I was worth keeping. I used the same week to decide if I want to be kept by someone who thinks that is an acceptable way to handle a marriage. I signed with a steady hand, and I decided I do not. You cannot do this. We can fix it," she said. "No," I said gently. "We cannot. The core problem is not fixable with promises. You do not see me as an equal partner. You see me as someone whose place in your life requires periodic review." I stood and placed the signed papers in her hands. "I am not angry anymore. I am not hurt anymore. I am simply done being married to someone who treats love like a performance evaluation." She clutched the papers without looking down. "What about everything we built? 6 years of marriage. Our home. Our plans. All of that rested on the belief that we both valued each other without conditions," I said. "You have shown that belief was wrong, at least on your side. I can change." "I will change," she said. "Maybe you will," I said. "But not with me. I am not interested in being someone's lesson or redemption project. I want to be with a person who already knows my worth without needing a week to think it over." I started toward the stairs, then paused and looked back. She sat on the couch with the divorce papers in her hands and tears running down her face, likely understanding that her evaluation week had backfired in the loudest way possible. "For what it is worth," I said, "I hope you learn from this. I hope your next relationship is one you do not feel the need to test or evaluate or put on probation. That is what real love looks like. It looks like choosing a person and not questioning that choice." "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked. "Whatever you decide," I said. "You are free to find someone whose worth you do not need to weigh on a schedule. Someone who fits the standards you are still working out. Someone who does not mind being evaluated." I went upstairs to pack a bag. I would stay at a hotel while we worked out the logistics. The hard part was finished. I had chosen my own value over someone else's uncertainty about it. Behind me, I could hear her sobs, the sound of a week-long test costing her the very thing she said she wanted to preserve. That was no longer my burden. I had given her exactly what she asked for, an honest picture of life without me. The difference was that she thought she alone controlled the choice. She forgot that ultimatums cut both ways, and that a man who knows his value does not wait for other people to recognize it. He goes where it is already known. As I folded shirts into my bag, I felt something I had not felt in months: peace. The quiet kind that comes when you stop the exhausting grind of trying to prove yourself to someone who should already see you. She had taken her week to think. I had taken my freedom.